You don't just look at a Pontiac GTO Judge from 1970. You feel it. Long before the engine turns, it sends a vibration through the air that settles in your chest. That's not sound. That's presence. In a world where every car tried to look refined, this one chose to look unapologetic. It didn't whisper its identity. It announced it with a roar. Painted in a wild shade called Orbit Orange, with black stripes slicing through the body like attitude made visible. The Judge wasn't built to please everyone. It was built to make a statement no one could ignore. In the late 1960s, Pontiac had already built a legend with the GTO. But by 1969, rivals were everywhere. The Camaro, the Mustang, the Roadrunner, each one louder, faster and hungrier for glory. Pontiac needed something different, something that didn't just race, it ruled. And then, in a spark of marketing genius mixed with street swagger, someone in the boardroom uttered a phrase heard on one of America's hottest comedy shows: "Here comes the Judge." A pop culture catchphrase turned into a battle cry. Overnight, a name meant for laughter became the title of a king. When Pontiac engineers got to work, they didn't stop at style. They dropped in a 400 cubic inch Ram Air 3 V8 engine that officially produced 366 horsepower. But everyone in the street scene knew that number was modest. Pair it with a 4-speed manual transmission, and you had a powertrain that didn't accelerate, it detonated. Turn the key and the Ram Air 3 doesn't start like a polite machine. It wakes up like an animal that's been chained too long. The exhaust pulses shake the ground. The shaker hood scoop quivers like it's alive. The whole car breathes, waiting for you to take command. Slide into the cockpit and you'll notice something almost theatrical about the layout. The dash curves toward the driver like a stage spotlight. The gauges glow with restrained confidence. Your right hand finds the chrome-tipped shifter. Cold, heavy, deliberate. When you press the clutch, you feel the weight of mechanical honesty. No servo assistance, no computer smoothing your effort. It's man and machine, muscle to metal. That's the magic of the GTO Judge. It doesn't filter the experience. It delivers it raw. Then there's that hood-mounted tachometer, Pontiac's cheeky stroke of genius. Other brands tucked theirs inside the dash. Pontiac threw it on the hood, right where the world could see it. Every time you revved, that needle danced under open sky. It was part engineering, part showmanship. A reminder that the Judge wasn't just a car, it was a performance. The road manners? Brutal, direct, intoxicating. The steering demands muscle. The clutch demands respect, and the throttle demands courage. Drop it into first, ease off, and the rear tires respond with a scream that announces your verdict on mediocrity. Within seconds, the scenery blurs, the speedometer climbs, and you realize this car doesn't drive. It declares. The GTO Judge was never meant to glide. It was meant to conquer asphalt. Every line on the body tells that same story. The dual racing stripes that flow across its sides aren't decoration. They're confidence in motion. The bold Judge decal stamped proudly on the fenders feels almost ironic, as if the car knows exactly what it is. Fast, flashy, and completely unashamed of either. Even parked, it radiates a kind of authority that modern cars can only imitate. And yet, beneath the theatrics lies real craftsmanship. The suspension, though stiff, keeps you grounded when that torque surges through the frame. The brakes, for their time, were strong, biting into motion like they meant it. The entire machine feels purposeful, like every bolt was tightened by someone who believed speed should have soul. You can sense the passion that built it, the refusal to let engineering become routine. That's why the GTO Judge struck a chord deeper than horsepower. It wasn't just about numbers. It was about attitude. It gave young drivers a sense of identity. It told them they could be loud, bold, and unfiltered. The Judge became a rolling mirror of American youth. Colorful, fearless, and slightly reckless. It was Detroit steel turned into rebellion on 4 wheels. Even its critics couldn't stay quiet. Some called it excessive, too bright, too arrogant, too much. But those very complaints were its greatest compliments. The Judge didn't care about approval. It cared about attention. It was built to provoke a reaction, not a review. And in doing so, it became something more than a car. It became a cultural artifact, a symbol of when America believed bigger, faster, louder was better. Behind that humor-soaked name and playful marketing was an engineering statement that whispered to competitors, "We can outbuild, outrun, and outshine you, and we'll have fun doing it." Every time the Ram Air 3 roared, it reminded the world that Pontiac was still the brand with gasoline in its veins and mischief in its grin. Driving one today feels like stepping through a time portal. The world outside might have changed. Cars got quieter, roads got safer. But inside that cabin, the rules remain the same. Every vibration in the steering wheel is history speaking. Every shift is a conversation with the engineers of 1970 who dared to build emotion instead of algorithms. And when the tach needle surges past 4,000 RPM, you remember exactly why people still chase the feeling that the Judge delivered half a century ago. It wasn't perfection that made it timeless. It was character. The Judge was imperfect in all the ways that made it human. Loud, impulsive, slightly irrational, but full of heart. It was built for a generation that wanted to feel alive, not just transported. And that's why, even now, its roar can still make strangers stop and stare. Because when Pontiac introduced the Judge, they weren't selling a car. They were selling a verdict that passion, humor, and horsepower could coexist in the same beautiful chaos of metal and motion. And as the sun sets on the golden age of muscle, that verdict still stands. The Judge doesn't fade into nostalgia. It lives on every time its engine fires and the world turns quiet to listen. By the time the echoes of 1970 began to fade, the world that created the Judge was already changing. The streets that once thundered with the sound of big block V8s were growing quiet. Gasoline prices were rising. The government was enforcing new emission laws. And insurance companies were cracking down on anything that sounded remotely fun. For cars like the Pontiac GTO Judge, it wasn't the competition that ended them. It was the world itself. Almost overnight, the muscle car dream that had defined a generation was under attack. The golden era of raw, unfiltered horsepower was being replaced by something softer, more controlled, more responsible. And the Judge, that loud orange, rebellious symbol of freedom, suddenly found itself on trial. Sales dropped, regulations tightened, and by 1971, Pontiac quietly discontinued the Judge, closing the case on one of the boldest chapters in American automotive history. But legends don't fade. They wait. For decades, the Judge became a ghost. Some sat abandoned in garages covered in dust, waiting for hands that still remembered what they were. Others were raced to death, their engines blown and their bodies rusted away. And yet, for those who had once felt the rumble of that 400 cubic inch Ram Air 3 under their chest, the memory never disappeared. The Judge had left something behind, a pulse, an echo of rebellion that refused to go silent. And then came the believers. Men like Wade Kawasaki, people who didn't just collect cars, but restored dreams. Wade wasn't just a businessman. He was a storyteller, a keeper of automotive history. He had grown up watching the Judge rule the roads and promised himself that one day he'd own one. Not a replica, not a tribute, but a real, untouched survivor. And years later he found it, a genuine 1970 Pontiac GTO Judge, preserved under layers of protective Z-Bart undercoating, hidden away from time. The restoration wasn't just mechanical, it was emotional. Every bolt he turned was a connection to the past. The Z-Bart coating, applied decades earlier, had kept the metal pristine, shielding it from Hawaii's salty air and the corrosion that had destroyed so many others. Under the grime was perfection. The original paint, the factory panels, the soul of the machine still intact. It was as if the Judge had been in witness protection, waiting for the right person to call it back to the spotlight. Wade's approach was simple. Keep it stock, keep it real. No unnecessary upgrades, no modern compromises. Just authenticity, because a car like the Judge doesn't need to be reinvented. It needs to be respected. The Ram Air 3 engine was rebuilt to its original glory. The 4-speed transmission tuned until every shift felt like 1970 again. And when it rolled out of the shop, glistening in its orbit orange paint, it wasn't just restored, it was reborn. Even the tires told a story. Wade's company, Coker Tire, reproduced the original Firestone wide oval tires in modern radial form, keeping the classic look, but giving them safer, more responsive handling. It was the perfect blend of heritage and innovation, the same design that roared down the highways of the 70s, now gripping the pavement of the 21st century. When that car moved again, it wasn't nostalgia. It was proof that craftsmanship never dies. It just waits to be rediscovered. Driving the Judge today is a spiritual experience. You don't sit in it, you step into a time machine. The first twist of the key feels like opening a portal. The engine coughs, then growls, then finds its rhythm, a heartbeat steady and proud. The tachometer on the hood twitches to life. The exhaust fills the air with that unmistakable thunder, and for a moment, you remember what the open road used to mean. No screens, no driving modes, no filters. Just you, the clutch, and a roaring ram air engine that still demands your full attention. When Wade takes the Judge out for a drive, you can see the smile, that quiet, satisfied grin that every car lover understands. The way his hand rests on the shifter isn't casual. It's reverent. He's not just driving metal, he's driving memory. Each gear is a reminder of a time when America's cars had character, when speed was an art form, and when muscle wasn't about numbers but about emotion, and the world noticed. Car enthusiasts from around the globe began to flock to see the Judge in its restored glory. At car shows, it doesn't just draw attention, it commands it. Younger generations who never lived through the muscle era stand mesmerized, realizing that before computers and traction control, there was this pure mechanical honesty. Every vibration, every roar, every shake of the shaker hood tells the story of a time when cars had souls. But perhaps the most powerful part of the Judge's story is what it represents today. It's not just a symbol of power or speed. It's a reminder of authenticity. In a world obsessed with perfection, the Judge wasn't flawless. It rattled, it guzzled fuel. It was loud enough to wake the neighborhood. But that's what made it real. It was bold in an era that rewarded conformity. And 50 years later, that same attitude feels revolutionary all over again. Pontiac may no longer exist as a brand, but its spirit still drives through every survivor like the Judge. And when that 400 cubic inch V8 fires up, it's not just the engine that comes alive, it's an entire philosophy. A belief that cars should make you feel, that power should have personality, that driving should be an experience, not a routine. And maybe that's the real verdict. The Judge was never just a name or a trim level. It was an identity. It spoke for a generation that refused to be quiet. A time when design was daring and speed was unapologetic. It stood for every driver who wanted to stand out, every rebel who believed life should be loud. So when you hear that deep rumble in the distance and catch a glimpse of bright orbit orange rolling toward you, remember, this isn't just a car passing by. It's a legend reminding the world that passion never goes out of style. Because the Judge doesn't just rule the road, it rules time itself.